Welcome to the Millennial Recruiter podcast, the podcast for forward-thinking recruiters. On this episode, I am joined by the guru of retained search, Louise Archer. So as you can probably guess, we're going to be talking about selling retained recruitment solutions. So what we talk about is what is retained, why does it benefit both yourself as a recruiter, but also why does it benefit your client? And what different things can you do to enable you to start having conversations where your clients will think, retains the perfect solution for them. So guys, as always, I hope you enjoy this episode. And if you do, it's always awesome if you could leave me a review on Apple. Thank you so much and enjoy. Hey Lou, welcome to the Millennial Recruiter podcast. How's it going today? You all right?
I'm good, Ben. Thank you for having me. It's very nice to be here.
Thank you so much for coming on. I'm really looking forward to this. And as I said to you before this call, a lot of my previous guests have mentioned you to me about being the go-to person for retained recruitment. And I think I said to you beforehand, I was contingency through and through, but more and more people I think are going retained. It shows a real, I suppose, professionalism within the marketplace. Can you tell me a bit about yourself, your background, and how you got to do what you're doing at the moment, though?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Ben. It happened by accident. If I'm honest, that's how I'm doing what I'm doing at the moment. I'm a recruiter. I never set out to be a trainer, and I think if you'd said to me 10 years ago that you're going to end up in training, I would have laughed them out of the room. It wasn't something that I ever had on my agenda. But it really happened by accident. I was a contingent recruiter for 15 years. I'd been in-house briefly. I'd been in the States for some time. I'd worked across Europe, but it was all contingent, even quite a lot of it contract. And it wasn't until I came back into the UK and was sitting near someone that was working on a retained basis, and subsequently taught me how to do it, my whole world completely changed, and what I thought was really only for senior executive, and a bit of a mystery, suddenly became my reality. And I learned how much better it is to work in partnership with clients, and how it isn't a smoke and mirrors, or it doesn't have to be, this mysterious dark art. It really is a committed partnership where you work together to reach a result. And that just made so much sense to me all of a sudden. And all the kind of love that I'd been losing for recruitment kind of faded away, and I fell back in love with it again. And it was such a massive turning point that I really flew with it and did really well, working on a retained basis. And as a result of that, I think the people around me started to realize that it was something that they could do too. And we grew that team, and we rolled it out globally, and it proved the point to everybody that it was possible in lots of different ways. And so it wasn't until I went to go and work for a search firm and a research firm that I really saw how it was really done at C-suite levels and stuff. And I mean, what happened with the business was that a guy I used to work with contacted me, and I was on garden leave at the time, and said, I've moved to a company that don't work on a retained basis, but they really should, because it's niche and it's tough. It's a tough market, and will you come and work for us and teach us how to do it? I wasn't ready to work for anyone else, but he eventually persuaded me to do some training sessions with them. And that was how it started. It went really well. Somebody heard about what we did, and asked me to do it for them. And then someone else heard about it, and that was about 3 years ago. And so what was never going to be a business has suddenly grown arms and legs. And the only reason I actually set the company up was because a company that wanted me to do some training wouldn't work with me as an individual, and it had to be a limited company, so here we are 3 years later, and it's pretty much all I do. I did about 5 searches last year, haven't done any this year, so now it's pretty much teaching other people how to do it.
For someone that doesn't know what retained is, can you give a bit more depth in terms of what
Yeah,
retained is?
definitely. Yeah, definitely. Because I think, and it's a bigger question than just a simple kind of what is it, because I think even those that have heard of retained search, I think have a mixed understanding of exactly what it is. People think, is it money up front? Is it headhunting? Is it just the same as a contingent recruitment service but just more expensive? What exactly is the difference? And so the way I define it is this: it's some financial commitment from your client which enables you to apply a rigorous and robust search process and do whatever it takes to commit to working with them until the position is filled.
Yeah.
And that's my definition of retained search. It doesn't really matter what that financial commitment looks like, as long as it's enough that matters. It doesn't necessarily have to be a third, a third, a third. I don't believe that it has to be 33%. I'm a big believer in keeping it flexible, as long as there's some financial commitment that enables you to confidently commit the time and resources to do whatever is necessary to guarantee that you reach a result.
Obviously, it's something we spoke about beforehand. Now, we were speaking about ethical recruitment, and I know that your viewpoint is it's not just money to make money. Why do you think it is important for you for a client to show that financial commitment?
Because when we work on a contingent basis, we're working on a no-win, no-fee. There's no commitment on either side. When a client asks us to work on a position on that basis, what we're doing is working at risk.
Yeah.
And there's only so much we can do. There is only so much we can do on that basis, because we run the risk that the client might accept a CV from somewhere else, or decide to promote somebody internally, or decide not to go ahead with the hire after all. So it's not logical or commercial. It doesn't make sense for us to commit large amounts of time and resources to reaching a result when there is no financial commitment from the client. So it's ethical to say, these are the different ways in which we can work with you. We can work with no commitment on a no win, no fee basis, but there is only so much I can do on that basis.
Yeah.
If what you want is a partner to commit to working with you, to apply a rigorous and robust process, to look at give you all of the different options that are available to you, and to commit to doing that until we reach a result, I need to reduce the risk that I'm taking in order to invest that time and energy. So I need some financial commitment in order to be able to work with you in this way.
And I suppose that the thing that I think a lot of my listeners would be really interested in is what types of conversation are you having that enables you to show enough value to get a client to give a financial commitment up front?
Well, it's solution selling, really, Ben. And so for that, to be able to have a conversation with a client where you fully understand their situation, is being able to diagnose whether this type of solution is the right solution or not, which then puts you in the position to either recommend it or not.
Yeah.
So the key to get in the right position to have that kind of dialogue is to ask questions and fully diagnose the situation. It doesn't matter whether it's a client that you're already working with or whether it's a brand new client and you've never worked with before. That process is the same, and it's all led with questions. And the way that it can be really effective to do it is to take them on a journey through them as a person, then the business, then talent acquisition, and then do the discovery around how talent acquisition is going for them in general. And then how is it going on this position? Often there's a specific position that they're having problems with, and take a step back. How's it going? What methods are you using at the moment? Instead of just continuing to send CVs or work in the way that we've always worked, let's just take a step back. Is this actually working for you? Is it working for me? A lot of the time in these niche markets where talent is slim on the ground, a contingent method isn't working particularly well for any of the parties. And actually, if we step back and look at it, the client is a bit frustrated. They're not getting the quality or quantity of CVs they want. The consultant's a bit frustrated. They're not getting the feedback, or they can't put the time into it because it's going to the bottom of their pile. And actually, if we look at it, it would make sense to commit to each other to carrying out a more robust search, but we can't do that unless we get some commitment. So it's all in the discovery. It's all in those questions that we ask at the front end.
Yeah, it's funny, like you say that, because as much as I said about being contingent through and through, I'm also solution selling through and through. I think understanding as much about the client as possible allows us to really showcase value to them. And
Mm,
whether that is like showing them how viable the position that they have is, or even if a permanent person is the right person, like you said yourself about being a contract consultant in the past. I think that almost what I love about recruitment is there are so many opportunities to add value to clients in that way. So
mm.
I think from your perspective, what skills do the consultants need to have to be in a position to start to potentially ask for more retained work?
Um, what skills do they need to have? It's less about the skills for me, Ben, and more about the attitude.
Yeah.
You know, what I found overwhelmingly over the past few years of teaching different types of consultants from different, different experience levels and different capabilities, is that those that have a drive to do a really good job, those that really care about what they're doing and they care about their clients, those are the ones that do the best with this, because it's not about making a fast buck, and it's not about, putting money on the board. Yes, that's important, but for me that's always been a byproduct of doing a good job. And so if your driver is to care about where your clients are at and how they're getting on with, recruitment in general, and you're genuinely interested in how they're getting on, and you're looking for those pain points and thinking, how can I alleviate that, and how can I help my client with those things, and you've been taught, the skill set and the tools to articulate, a retained solution, and how to deliver that project. I wouldn't advocate that you just blindly go out there and ask clients for money up front without, knowing how to deliver on a retained assignment. But if you've got that driver to want to understand, to want to solve problems, and to want to deliver a great service, then you'll be successful with retained solutions. It's kind of as simple as that for me.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. Like, one of the things I actually took away from a previous podcast guest that I had was chase relationships, don't chase money.
Mm,
And I think that's such a valuable lesson to any recruiter. Now, obviously, like a big thing, I suppose, when people think of retain, they think headhunting. Like,
mm.
for you, what would you say headhunting is?
Well, it's probably part of a retained search in more cases than not. It's part of one of the processes that we use to deliver on a retained search assignment. It might not be necessary, for some of the clients that, have retained me in the past, they're quite straightforward positions, and actually they don't require headhunting. It is just a case of putting an advert on, or scouring the job boards, and you don't actually need to proactively headhunt candidates. But usually if a firm is needing a retained solution, and is wanting to partner with a consultant in that way, it's because an element of proactive candidate generation is required, and that for me is approaching passive candidates that aren't responding to initial messages or adverts. So headhunting, for me, is not just sending LinkedIn messages out or sending emails out. It's about a careful, well-planned approach to an individual candidate with a well thought through proposition that, as far as we know from what we can tell, is going to be a potentially very interesting proposition to them. And being professionally persistent, as I call it, about putting that opportunity in front of them, until they have had chance to fully consider it and decide whether it's something they want to proceed with or not. So that might involve, yes, initially reaching out on LinkedIn, and then perhaps a few days later dropping them a note by email. It might involve looking for their contact number, and it might involve contacting through the switchboard and getting through to them, whatever cunning ways we might have of getting around different people to get to speak to them directly. And in the past, I've written letters. I've written letters to handwritten letters to candidates' work address, with their address to them, to explain that I'd love an opportunity to speak with them, and it works.
Yeah.
So it's about putting an opportunity in front of a candidate for the right reasons, and doing that how in whatever means possible it is to do that.
I mean, one thing I suppose I've been guilty of in the past is maybe having a negative outlook to, I suppose, old school ways of working in recruitment.
Right.
Yeah, I suppose a previous guest of mine was talking to me about it and said, well, back when I first did recruitment, I was considered as like an agent of my candidate. How we worked was build solid relationships with candidates and then represent them to companies,
Yeah.
which sounds like almost like the point of view that you're coming from. So, I mean, from your perspective, how would you say recruitment sort of changed in the time that you've been involved in the industry?
Interesting. And I do, on that point, it is still a very good way of opening doors. I still, and a lot of the search consultants that I've worked with and still do use, spec CVs as we call them, to open doors for opportunities, and it works just as well on the retain front. I think there's a few things to remember if you're looking to generate retained business using that approach, and that is to always say that this candidate has been found as a result of a search, so that as and when you get into the discussion that candidate isn't right, because 9 times out of 10 the person that you spec in isn't actually the person that gets the job anyway, then you can explain that the way to find more candidates like this is carry out that same process. And you retain, working on a retained basis and proactively approaching candidates in the market, the consequence of that is that you will find candidates that are not actively looking for a position, but aren't right for the position that you're headhunting for. And you often are the only person in the world that knows that candidate is potentially open for an opportunity. And so they are the perfect candidate if they're good enough to actually open, to introduce to, incidentally, the target list that you've probably been headhunting candidates from for that assignment. So it makes sense to use all the work that you've done and speculatively sending those candidates to those companies. Obviously, you don't send the candidate to the company that you've taken them out of course. But that it can work really nicely together, basically, using those candidates to open doors for future searches and so on. So I always say, in really niche markets where candidates are sought after and the skill sets are scarce, it makes sense to either be working on a retained basis with a committed client or with a grade A candidate exclusively, and almost nothing else. It doesn't really make sense to be working on a contingent basis. So I do believe, that is still really, it's really relevant, and it works, and it still works now. But how have I seen it change? I was thinking about this question. I think the biggest thing for me is when I was a contingent recruiter, I had no idea that it was going to ever be possible to work on a retained basis. I thought it was something that I would never be able to do. It was a whole echelon of people that I was never going to be in that league. And never mind talent mapping and talent pipelining and competitor intelligence studies and RPO and multi-hire campaigns. That was just a world that I didn't think I'd ever inhabit. And I think the more and more, it happened for me. I was lucky enough to be exposed to it, and I realized that not only was it not a mystery, but actually straightforward, really good recruiters that give a shit about what we're doing can actually be really good at those things, at those very, very things. And as much as I can, I want to bring that to everybody and make that world of being partners and being a true partner and it sounds cheesy and corny, but there's no better way to explain it, is possible. And so I'd like to think that it's changing, in that more and more people that are operating on a contingent basis are starting to realize now that they don't have to be stuck in this CV race, in this master slave relationship, and that it is possible to to work sensibly in partnership with clients.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's one of the crucial things. As much as I said, I wasn't big on retained. What I always was big on is having
fewer client relationships, but better client relationships, rather than
Yeah.
a lot of companies that I was cold calling and specking in the random CVs to. I'd rather have companies that I knew inside out, where internally I had different connections and I knew the types of candidates they wanted. And it's quite funny, like when people talk about headhunting, sometimes they see it as just those really high level roles. Whereas if I look at two of the best young engineering consultants that I know, they were talking to a headhunter once and they said, well, what's the difference between what you do and what we do? And the headhunter tried to talk about talent mapping and things like that. And one of them, Vinny, was like, oh, so you mean when I understand every single company in Ferrari's downline as to what composite laminators they use, so I can then spec them to other manufacturers that are tier one suppliers of Ferrari? And that in a way is headhunting. That's what he did. He understood who works where, why they're good at, why they've got a good skill set, who do they know. That's why he built a very, very good engineering desk. So for you, like, how do you see Retained? Is it just for those high echelon of roles, or can it be utilized across different, I suppose, recruitment industries?
No, definitely not. I don't think it is just for senior positions. And, time and time again, not only have I, one of the pieces of search work I did last year was for 25k telesales positions in Salford Keys. So it's pretty much it can be as low as that. It doesn't matter what level it is. It doesn't matter where it is. And it doesn't matter, what discipline largely or function or market. It what I was going to say before, and I just jotted down because I forgot to mention it. Basically, if a client is getting what they want when they want it, and it's an enjoyable process, and everything that they're doing from a talent acquisition perspective is all hunky dory and it's going smoothly, not only is it it's silly really to try and persuade them to do something differently, but it's not really very consultative because it's just not necessary. Why would they change to a retained model if everything is absolutely gravy? But the reality of the situation is that the contingent model isn't ideal, and because you've not got any commitment from the client, you can only put so much time into it, which means you can only do so much, which means those tougher, those more niche, those specialist, or maybe it's not a great location, or it's a brand that's a bit unknown in the market, or maybe it's been out in the market for a while, or all those types of positions don't often get the attention that they need. And so when you ask a client, how's it going from a talent acquisition perspective? Is everything gravy? You're getting what you want when you want it, and it's an enjoyable process? These types of clients tend to say, I'm finding it really tough. It's difficult. We're not seeing the quality, or we're not seeing the quantity, or we just can't seem to attract people to this location, or we seem to be losing out to our competitors, or people are getting counter offers. And that's where we can suggest that we can take a different approach. And that's where it doesn't need to be senior. It doesn't need to be, a C-suite position. It can be a solution to a challenge. And this is back to our solution sales again. It's about diagnosing the situation. So no, I don't believe that it's just for senior positions at all.
Okay, fantastic. And I suppose sometimes for me, then it could even be a mindset point from the consultant, like someone like myself, where I hadn't seen Retained before. I would be quite comfortable selling contingent, but in a way, almost what you're saying is if you're selling with lots of value to consultant companies, if you know your marketplace, it probably is better from a commitment point of view with your clients to actually go retained. Am I sort of correct in thinking that? If you're a good contingent recruiter, is it worth you thinking about starting to look at more retained options?
Well, put it this way: if you're working, I think it comes from a position of pain. If you're getting what you want from your contingent desk and you're happy days, then I'm not someone to say I think you should change the way that you're working. Often though, you'll work on a position, you'll put loads of time and effort into it, and you'll get to the end of the process, and the client will go, you know what? On balance, I think what we've decided to do is promote this guy internally, or I've just had a CV and we've decided to interview them. And I know we weren't working with anyone else. I know it was exclusive with you, but we've just had this interview and we're going to take them on. And you end up thinking, bloody hell, why have I done that with no commitment and put all that time and effort into it? And so the drivers to want to work with clients on a retained basis come from usually a position of pain, either because the client is really struggling to get what they want, or you're not getting what you want from your desk and it's not going the way you want it to go. So if you're working on, I don't know, let's say you're working on 5-10 positions, and a client comes to you and says, look, I've got this position, I want you to resource it, and it's tough, and it's going to require time, then that's an ideal opportunity to think, well, am I going to take it on a contingent basis? Realistically, how much time am I actually going to dedicate to it? Yeah. I think I've probably got 3 other positions I'm more likely, or 4 other positions I'm more likely to fill. However, if the client did commit to you financially, would that enable you to put more time and effort into it and therefore reach a result? And those, for a busy contingent recruiter, are the opportunities to say, the only way that I can put in the time and effort necessary to deliver a result on that is if we work on a retained basis. And that can be it can be the change between working contingent to working retained. And then, of course, as you start to replace contingent jobs with retained, then they fall off and you end up not working contingently.
And from your perspective, obviously as someone that teaches selling retained and does it herself, what would you say the client's viewpoint is in terms of retained? What type of things they tend to say to you when you first start to sell that type of solution?
I mean, there's only so many questions and objections that, as I've discovered over the years, that they have. There's quite a lot of them, but there is only so many. Yeah. I think that last count there was about 20 different objections and questions. It depends how you pitch it, in honesty, Ben. If you just say, well, I want some money up front, then you're going to get all of those objections. Well, yeah. Why should I do that when nobody else is doing it? Or what happens if I pay the retainer and then you don't, find the candidates? And what do you mean money up front? What are you talking about? How much? And what's the difference? What are you going to do differently? Why do you need money up front? If you don't actually explain anything, then you're going to have to answer all of those questions. Of course. So, one of the things that is important when we teach how to articulate, and I don't really like using the word pitch, but how to articulate the way that we want to work and why, is to cover a lot of those questions in the first instance. So one of the main ones, for example, is, why should we pay you some money up front? So if when you explain the different ways that we work, we said something like, look, when we're supporting our clients with permanent hires, we work with our clients in different ways depending on the circumstance. So for easy to fill, everyday, straightforward hires, we work on a contingent basis. You'll be familiar with that. That's a no-win, no fee. It's often in conjunction with other suppliers, and there's no commitment on either side. When things start to get more challenging, whether it's a niche skill set or a senior position, or it's a challenging location, or it's critical or urgent, then we apply retained search methodology, and that's our headhunting service. And then if you go on to explain, in many cases, contingent recruitment works. However, in the case of a more challenging position or more complex situation, then it's necessary to apply a more rigorous process and more time and more effort. And basically, some financial commitment from you enables me to do that, and importantly, enables me to commit to working with you until the position is filled. And if you explain it like that, you reduce the questions from the client side.
No, definitely. I mean, it's funny. Like, part of the reason why I asked that question is I'd been off the tools for quite a while, so I was just delivering training, seeing what people do. But over the past year, speaking to clients, being in client meetings more, and it was actually a client that said to me, "What solution do we offer?" and spoke about retained, rather than me speaking to them about it, because I think client expectations, I don't know if it's just me, but it has changed. I think in some ways what I love about recruitment is there is a disparity in the level of service that people offer, that clients are fully aware of that now. And sometimes they want a more, I suppose, robust, high level solution.
Yeah. I mean, bring it on. It's about time. It's about time. What I would love for us to get to, and why I'm always really happy to, give so much help to people in this area as much as I can, is I'd love it with us to get to the situation where clients aren't using a contingent model. They are looking, their decision is who they are going to work with, not ever just soliciting CVs or asking lots of agencies to send CVs. That it's more of a choice of who carries out the search, not how it's done.
Yeah, because I think most of us know that most jobs aren't placed via adverts. You can find great candidates via adverts. It's never a candidate who's suitable for the job that they're applying
so true,
for.
Yeah. So true. Yeah.
I mean, like with this type of stuff, like where do you think the recruitment industry is going at the moment?
I mean, I am doing my damnedest, Ben, for it to go for it to go this way. For clients to do their, as you would if you were, having an extension built on your house. You wouldn't instruct 3 different builders and say, well, the one that does the best work I'm going to pay at the end of it. You would do your due diligence beforehand. You would do your research on the builder. You'd take references. You'd go and have a look at some of the work that they've done, and you'd get them to give you a price, and you'd choose the one to do the work, and they would execute that work for you. I would like that to be the way that we go for certainly for critical hires, certainly for these, the technical niche specialist critical. I mean, let's face it, what is an easy to fill everyday position these days? I've not seen one for many years. Even those bloody telesales positions in Salford Quays were rock solid, because they wanted not just the right, sales experience, but they wanted a culture fit that would fit in with the team. So for all those kinds of positions when, it's not just a case where anyone will do, I'd like to think that, slowly but surely we're all educating clients to choose a partner and to work in partnership with their their chosen firm rather than on a PSL or contingent basis. But you probably know more than me because you're more, you probably talk around, wider trends, and I'm, so focused on the retained. What else have I where do I think it's going? I think more and more we see clients looking for bigger solutions. We see clients looking to benefit from economies of scale on bigger projects. And, over the last 12 months, we've won so many multi-hire campaigns, project RPOs, more than I've probably experienced in the past. So probably that's the trend that I'm seeing more and more, Ben. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I would almost agree that companies are looking for real partners now, someone that can really understand that company inside and out, and therefore be able to supply against numerous roles. Like master vendor contracts, I think, are going to become more common. And you know what? Probably the thing I love, like more recruiters working in partnership together. Something that I do it. We split fee with all sorts of different people. If I've got a client and someone else has got a network of suitable candidates, then let's work together on it.
Yeah, good.
Let's work in partnership. And I suppose another question that I've got for you is, obviously, like we've talked about, like headhunting and things like that. Is there any sort of tools or like, I don't know, like software or things like that you find really effective to support you with your searching at the moment?
So it comes up a lot in our community, actually, software. I am not an expert and I would never profess to be, but the things that come up quite a lot are Lucia for finding numbers. I'm sure that's nothing new. In terms of software for search, there's always debates about the pros and cons of something like Invenius versus Vincere. And the reporting is arguably better, I think, in Invenius. I love a software called Clockwork for searches specifically.
What's Clockwork? Sorry.
Clockwork is a executive search specific software that enables you to share your full workings with your client. They see the full talent pool. professional. They see the candidates, where they're up to in the process, the results of the assessments that you've done. I really like it.
How
In
important
terms
do you
of,
think
the detective
assessment
stuff,
is?
probably not. Sorry?
How important do you think assessment is when it comes to search? Are there any sort of, do you use psychometrics or?
I work with clients who like to use, one of my clients in particular likes the Thomas profiles, the DISC assessments. I'm not a believer that it's necessary as a recruiter for us to apply psychometrics. But it can help a client. So I always, if a client wants to use it, then I'll always be happy to adopt, something like the Savile Wave or something similar, or the Thomas assessments. But for me as a recruiter, all I want to do is to make sure that the candidates meet the essential competencies for the position, from a technical and the light is changing in here, both from a technical and from a behavioural perspective. So all I do, Ben, is just a really simple basic competency assessment with candidates, and together with the client we just agree what are those essential competencies that we need from a technical perspective and a behavioural perspective, and I agree 3 or 4 of each, and then put together simple, straightforward situational questions. Tell me about a time when you have led a project from concept to commissioning, or whatever that competency is, and actually get the candidate to give me their best example of when they've done that, so that it's all evidence-based. And so when I'm sharing my assessment with clients, it's simply explaining, yes, they do have this experience. This was where they were when they did this. This was what it looks like. This is what they did. This was their involvement. And I just use the STAR methodology to help, gauge their answers, just to make sure that they can't bullshit it, basically.
Yeah. No, that's fantastic. Actually, it's quite funny you said that. I remember, before the call, I think we were talking about, or I mentioned candidate qualification and stuff. And actually, I recently went from being a sort of outside supplier to someone who's getting every single vacancy well in the front of the company. And it was because of that. I sent a candidate to them and they came back with a couple of questions. And I could literally pick up the phone straight away and actually say, this is what they've done, this and this.
Yeah.
I think that's that thing. It's because of speaking to candidates and really wanting to understand those things in advance.
Yeah.
I think that out of the 4 questions they had, there was only one of them I couldn't answer without having to speak to the candidate again. All the rest of it was crucial. And I think it's funny, even with what you said there, tools and stuff are really useful. I was a big geek. I did a X-ray searching training this morning for an L&D community. Wow. I made money probably from Boolean searches, but ultimately, you don't necessarily need all of that. What you need to do is be able to really understand what a company wants, and then understand how that candidate fits that, and understand it in detail, and have those clear examples. And if a candidate's going through a process, be able to interview them like you're doing a first stage interview.
Sorry, Ben.
There's no worries at all. I don't think anyone's going to have a problem hearing about your cat coming on screen.
He wants to be a part of everything.
My girlfriend was actually interviewing someone recently, and their cat came on screen, and I think it was why she wanted to hire the person.
Oh, yeah, it's funny, isn't it, how our home lives are kind of, bleeding into work, and everybody's accepting of it now. So I did have to jump off the call earlier because the chickens, I'd opened the door because it got really warm in here, and the chickens came into the office. So I had to chase them out. So yeah, it doesn't need to be complicated, but you're right. Applying some kind of assessment, not only does it give you the assurance that that candidate does meet the criteria, but in turn that enables you to give the client the confidence that they do. And where you get a client, wavering maybe, or I'm not sure, whether you can then help them with that decision over the evidence that either they have got that experience, or I'm not sure either. Their example on this was quite weak, and I think we need to probe them a little bit deeper on this. And it is enabling you to be a partner and enabling you to be to help the client through that process objectively. And if you don't have that information about your candidate and you haven't actually carried out any assessment, it's all just, well, I think, or a gut feel, which isn't really that helpful.
Yeah, and you know what? I think you said something so valuable there. Like, if you're not sure about whether a candidate fits or not, rather than just trying to force the client to take them on to get the fee, it's actually better to not do that and
tell the client.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was talking to someone about it. I remember doing industrial recruitment. I had a forklift driving contract, and the company used to do assessment days. I was the only agency they called when they needed someone instantly, and they didn't have anyone who had gone through the assessment. And I remember arguing with one of my bosses about it because I got a call and I said, "Oh, comrade, I don't have anyone at the time." And my boss said to me, "But oh, Ben, you've always got forklift drivers." And I always do have forklift drivers, but I didn't have anyone that I trusted enough to go through into my best client without having, rather than doing an 8-hour assessment, doing 30 minutes. And I still deal with that company now sometimes, and that was one of the reasons why, because even I wouldn't try and make money for doing something badly or half-assed and send them a candidate who's then gonna go and crash one of our forklift trucks and end up destroying thousands of pounds worth of stuff.
Versus, but the thing is, it's really relevant for what we're talking about on the retain piece, because when we're working on that no win, no fee basis, it's not really in our interest to dissuade the client from a candidate or explain to the client that we're worried that that candidate doesn't fit quite right. Whereas when we're working on a retain basis, it's the reverse. We're able to be objective because we're going to make the fee no matter what. It's our position, it's our search, we're running it. It's going to result in a fee. It's in our interest to get the best possible result because that's a client that's going to work with us on a retained basis again and again and again, providing we get it right. And so it's in our interest to say to the client, actually, on questioning, this candidate looks good in these areas, but looks weak in these areas. And I think we need to probe deeper here. This candidate looks good in these areas, but is weaker in these. Nobody's ever perfect, but it enables us to be honest and straightforward in that process because we know we're gonna make the fee.
Yeah, definitely. One final question in there, and this is always my favourite question to finish off with.
Oh God.
If you're speaking to someone who's brand new to recruitment, what advice would you give them to have a long-term successful career?
Learn how to work on a retained basis right at the start. I mean, there are pros and cons to cutting your teeth on contingent first. You learn a lot. It makes you very agile. It makes you very tenacious and very hungry. And those that grow up through search and through the search route tend not to have the same edge that we get as contingent recruiters. So I don't know whether that would be actually my advice. What would it be? I would say just surround yourself with the people that you admire and respect the most. Listen to the recruiters that you love and you want to be like. Get as close to them as you can. Listen to what they say on the phone. Listen to the way they handle situations. The more you hear from people that you like, the more you should listen to them and just soak up as much from the best as you possibly can. I think that's my advice.
Fantastic. That's a great answer. And look, again, I couldn't disagree with you at all there. Like, I think a big part of my initial success was down to having really good managers and watching Kat sell. It was amazing. Like, I learned so much from that and understanding that, in fact, the best way in terms of watching her to build relationships was to just really get on with people and understand lots about them and really immerse yourself in the industry. So yeah. I suppose
and really, I suppose just to add to that, don't just be content with listening to them, as and when you can. Actually, go as far as to say, can I listen in on that full conversation? Can I dial in so I can listen to the client side, and can I go with you on that meeting? And if they say no, well, they say no, you've not lost anything, but just try and get into as much of that as you can and see how it's really done, and how the good guys do it.
Yeah, definitely. Well, just why I do the podcast and get to speak to fantastic people like yourself, Lee.
Oh, thanks,
So
Ben.
on a final one, obviously I wanted to speak to you because of your expertise in Retained. How do you usually work with people? Like, what if someone wanted to find out more about what you did? What would you say?
So we run a training course. It's all delivered by me. So I would love to hear from anyone that's interested in the program and what we do and how we do it. It's a 7-week program, but you get lifetime access to the community, which involves twice weekly sessions with me forever if you want them. The course teaches you everything that you need to know from mindset through to sales and delivery, even if you have no experience of Retained at all. And we run it in small groups of 4. And all you need to do to find out more is to go to my website at retrainedsearch.com and click talk to us and book a call in my diary and let me have a chat with you and let me find out a bit more about you, where you're up to, what experience you've got so far, and where you'd like to get to. And I'll tell you a bit more about what we do and how we do it.
Fantastic. And yeah, as I said to you before, I'll probably catch up with you after this because I do want, in fact, one of my consultants wants to go into that course.
Great.
For everyone that's listened, make sure you connect with Lou Archer. Like, it's been a phenomenal conversation. I've really enjoyed it.
Thanks, Ben.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.